Welcome everybody. Today we will talk about how to contribute to the MPF documentation. Let's get going and have a look at the MPF documentation. Yeah, I mean that's like a topic where we had I wouldn't say troubles in the past, but a lot of people actually wanted to contribute to the MPF docs, and they failed somewhere or hit some roadblocks in the process of doing so. And today we will look into basically how this actually works. And I will show two workflows. The first one is like the simple workflow where you just want to, for example, change a typo somewhere or add like some paragraph, some text, something simple. And then I would show the more advanced workflow, which I'm basically using most of the time, where you can add like images or more complex changes in the structure of the documentation, or like in general, like changes which go over more than one file. And so let's start with the simple stuff first. So like I opened the MPF documentation here, and now we can look at it. And you probably noticed that there is an edit on GitHub link on the top right. Okay, a little bit larger here. And that's a magical link. And we will use this in a minute. So in the last stream, I actually noticed something which I probably didn't tell anybody, but I noticed that in the tutorial, the number in the last step is actually incorrect. So you see the tutorial has step 1 to step 20, but if you click on step 20, it says step 19. And that's actually wrong. I mean, obviously wrong. And so the first thing would be like, let's fix this number. And how would you typically do that? That's where this link here comes into play. You just press on edit on GitHub. And normally you would now have to log into GitHub. So I got like an account, chapter 2 here. But if you do not have a GitHub account, just sign up. You need an email. We will send you like an welcome email. You click on the email, you set a password, and then you got an account. That's the first thing you have to do. And that's also but it's helpful in a lot of ways. You can use this like in a lot of places, and you like most of the people probably have a GitHub account. So we managed that, and now we just basically got to the page where the documentation is generated from. And what we internally use is Sphinx. Sphinx is like a Python documentation toolkit. Nothing special to MPF, so a lot of projects are using that. And it's using restructured text. That's why those files are called RST, restructured text. And you can also like look up restructured text. So restructured text, and you will find like, okay, that's German, but we can turn it to English. You can look it up in Wikipedia, or there are other references. It explains how this works. So this is a header, subheader, how lists are formatted, images, named links, anonymous links, literal blocks, or like code blocks. And that's also like about it. So that's basically all you need to know. There are also like editors which know restructure text, and they can format this for you, but it's also pretty easy to do it manually in most cases. It's rather picky about new lines, so if there's a new line here, then make a new line, or it might not render this correctly. Also, for example, here in this literal block, so for code, there has to be a new line. That's a common thing to get wrong. Also like the spaces here are important, and the length of the header. So this underline has to have the same length as the header itself. Otherwise, it will be unhappy. But there's like a lot of like documentation on that, so we didn't invent this. We invented a lot of weird formats already, so that's not on us, right? So this short like detour finished. You now fully understand how this works, but here on GitHub it doesn't look like that. And that's the reason. The reason for that is that GitHub also understands restructured text, and it renders restructured text for you here. Not completely. For example, it doesn't understand those interdocumentation links here, those doc blocks, but it understands like the general lists and underlines and so on, or headlines. But you can do two things now. You can click on raw, then you will see like how this looks unformatted. And if you want to change it, you would typically click on edit this file. And here you would have to be logged in, otherwise it wouldn't let you do that. And now we can fix, for example, this headline here. And as the length didn't change, we do not have to change the underline. And that is already like the change we are going to make. And now, since I'm like a contributor on the MPF repository, I can directly change the branch. That's an option which is probably not available for most of you. Only like a few people have commit access. It's like I think 4 or 5 people in the team. But for everybody else, there's like this option, which is also like often better. So I also often do it this way. So what this will do is it will like fork the repository, create a new branch with your changes, and then you can create a pull request with that changes. It basically will name this branch chapter 2 minus patch minus 1, probably because I already had patch 0, or maybe it starts at 1, I don't know. You can also name it differently. And now I can do propose changes, and you will see that it created this branch for me. And now I'm automatically going to the create open pull request page. So what this did now is this one click created a new branch, committed my change into this new branch, and now I got a Git repository which is called chapter 2 patch 1 with a branch. So like the branch is called this way. And now it helps me to make a pull request to bring this back to the repository. And now we can basically write some comments here if that's needed. I mean, for like obvious changes, that's not needed, but it's often ways nice to tell people why you did it and what you did. So fix the headline because the number has been wrong. And now we can set some labels. I'm not sure if you can actually do that here on the right, but I can do that. You can also choose a reviewer if you want. So you can have the top reviewers. That's Anthony, for example, or Quinn, or Compy if you want, Coleman. People from our community which contributed before. You can ask them to review your changes if you think that they know this area very well, but otherwise don't bother too much. And then you can create a pull request here. And now it will create a pull request inside the MPF repository. And this is then where like the MPF team gets an email. So I probably got an email now that some guy called Jabdoer2 created a pull request against the documentation to update 20 next steps RST. And now we got this nice pull request here. It will run the tests. So we got some tests for the documentation, which verify that coding style is okay and stuff like that. And that will be running like in a minute probably. Let's see. It didn't start yet, but might start in a few minutes, in a few seconds. I can also see like the changes here, and now you typically have to wait for somebody from the team to review your change. And then what they or me, for example, will do is click merge pull request here, and that will bring your changes into the MPF mainline, into the MPF repository. So let's do that. I mean, I'm pretty confident that this won't break won't break the tests. Not sure why they didn't start yet, but maybe it's down for maintenance. So let's click merge, and then I confirm the merge, and that's now where this actually made it into MPF, the dev branch. So now I can delete this branch. That's something you will see. I probably cannot delete your branch, but as I'm like the person which created the pull request and the reviewer, I can now also delete the branch on my repository. And now it's gone because it's not needed anymore. And this change is now inside the mpf-docs repository. So we can check it again. Tutorial. Yeah, you can also already see here the commit comment. And if we go there, it's now updated. It's probably not yet in the documentation. That will take a few seconds, or probably like 2 or 3 minutes. So now we can look at the tutorial. It's not there yet. This works like differently. There's a service called read the docs, and we are using like read the docs to render our tutorials. It's a managed service for open source projects. And now you should be able to see, no, it's German, but that's creation processes. And you can now see that it's creating the dev branch, and it started 1 minute ago. And now you can see that it actually is rendering like the documentation, and then it will be updating the documentation in like, I would guess like 3 minutes, and then it will be there. So that's the simple workflow if you just want to correct something. That's really how this works. And I guess like everybody can do this. That's really relatively simple. You can also do like more complex stuff with GitHub, but it's kind of tricky. So then you have to know how Git works, and that's often not so easy for people which are using the web interface, because if you know how Git works, you probably want to use the command line because you're used to that. I can do this in the command in the UI, but yeah, you have to know how it's working internally. Otherwise, that's a little bit tricky, and that's why I also wouldn't generally recommend it, to be honest. I would recommend to do this differently. So that's the simplest change, right? So for all what I'm telling today, there's also like some documentation here contributing to the MPF documentation. That's actually to make a quick change to an existing page. That's what we just did. And then there's also this one. Clone the mpf-doc repository locally to make bigger changes. So that's what we will look at next. So you typically do it this way. So you go to the mpf-docs repository, and then you click fork. And now usually you only have like one organization in GitHub. The screen wouldn't happen. I will now like fork it to my personal repository, and now it's forking the documentation into my personal one. Next is you click the clone, the clone link, right? So you copy this link here, and we will open a CLI, and let's do this. Let's do it from scratch. So we will actually So I will go into a temp directory because I got this checked out already, right? So I do not want to mess with that. So we will now clone it again. And it's now German, but don't worry, that will be very similar in English. And it's now downloading the repository, and that's already it. Change the language. And now you can open your favorite IDE, right? So you could, for example, open Visual Studio Code in this folder, and this should be able to render. Nah, they're wrong. You have to change into the folder. I only want to open like my docs folder. And now I got like Visual Studio Code open. No. And now I can do exactly what I did before. So we can look into the tutorial folder. Here, and we can, for example, look at get next steps, and you can see that it, that it kind of knows the stuff, but even offers me now to install like a linter for restructured text. Why not? Let's do it. And now it should even be able to lint this a little bit more. But you can see that it will probably complain if I do this wrong, I guess. Does it? Yeah, it does. Too short for title. So that's exactly what it is. So now, unless I make it like the same length, it will complain. So that's like one of the common things. And if you got VS Code with a linter, it will tell you if it's fundamentally broken at least. Doesn't mean that it's perfect, but at least that it will be working. Or yeah, likely work. let's put it this way. And now we can do like changes here locally. For example, we can, let's say we want, for example, like I did this beautiful video on like the tutorial on I think Wednesday. Yeah. Let's see if I can find it on YouTube. Yes, I can. And we can, for example, add this here if you want to see us work through the tutorial. You can also watch this video. And this video is always bad wording, right? Watch our walk through video. And now we have to format this link, and as far as I know, that looks this, and an underscore at the end. It's weird, but this is how links look. And now this should be in the docs, right? And let's say we want to add some more videos, right? For example, we could, what else could we link? We could like link something about the IDE setup. So we got like install mpf. It's complaining, but that's because something special. That's also valid. But some point we probably talk about using a proper IDE, and there we could like put the IDE video, for example. Sure, let's search for it. I know that we talk about like Notepad++ or something. Notepad. Here. Yeah, okay. If you want to, what does it do? Okay, that's incorrect. If you want to video about the nice perfect. You can also follow our video about perfect IDE setup. I mean, it's a shameless plug, I know, but it might help some newcomers. So like we can have this one here, and I guess that would also make sense in another place where we talk about the MPF language server. That's in tools, language server here. That totally makes sense here. And yeah. So what else can we add? Yeah, so for example, we got segment display player. That's also something where I did a video about. Let's look into that. Segment display player. Okay. If you want to see segment display player in action, have a look at our video about using a play field as display. Okay, so now I added like 3 new pieces here. I could also add like images, anything, right? And like my IDE here helps me to format it properly. And now we go back to our CLI. I mean, you could also do this, for example, in the Git client of your choice, right, or of your trust. I prefer the CLI, but that's mostly because I work like with Git basically every day at work personally, so probably use it like three hours a day. So I like the CLI. So typically you put in git status and it will tell you what changed. And so that's like those 4 files, and we can also run git diff. It will tell us which files changed and what changed. We can review our changes here. So that looks good. That doesn't look good, right? That's like a space at the end, and that's bad style. So we will look into the tutorial index and tutorial index, and we will remove the space and check it again. Now it's happy. And now we can basically create a pull request for that. So now if you look at it, I'm on the origin dev branch, or on the dev branch. That's basically my local copy of the mpf dev branch. So now you typically want to create your own branch. You do not have to technically, but it makes stuff more clear. So I will create a branch in the CLI. You do checkout -b for, I don't know what B stands for, to be honest. B for new branch. Okay. And new branch, that's what this means. And we call it add tutorial videos. And so switch to a new branch. We push this branch to GitHub. So now I got like a local branch. Now I have to push this to GitHub because like Git is like a distributed version control system. I push this branch. And now it complains that it doesn't know where to push this branch because it's a distributed system. But luckily it gives me like this nice suggestions how to do this, and I will just copy it, press enter, and now the magic happens. It's pushed to GitHub, and GitHub also gives you some help here. So it gives you a link here to create a pull request. I could now click this link, and I will do this in a minute, but I will also show you how you do it like differently. So the easiest way is now to click this link here. Alternatively, you can also just go to Mission Pinball mpf-docs. Or you go to your fork. So I go to chapter 2 mpf-docs. And now I forgot something. I actually forgot to commit my changes. So now those changes are still here, right? I forgot to commit this. So I now will do git commit -a, so a for everything, for all, I guess. I git commit everything, add, and I had like a git commit message, add tutorial video link. And now I can push it again. Now it knows the remote because I said it before. And now, yeah, now it's pushed, and it does not give me the link again, but we will have it later here. And now you can see if you open GitHub, I think it also doesn't matter if you go to your GitHub repository here or to the Mission Pinball one. Yeah, it also tells you that you recently pushed changes and if you want to create a pull request. And if you see this, it's often a good idea to click it. And now I can click this. And this looks familiar or very similar to the stuff we saw earlier, right? Where I changed the stuff in GitHub itself. And now I can also, again, I can scroll down and it will show me like the same changes here. That looks fine. Add videos, add tutorial videos. And now we can click create a pull request again. So, and if you click on this link here in the console, you will basically get to exactly the same page. So that looks exactly the same here. And so I guess you get the idea, right? It's exactly the same thing. And there are just different ways to reach it. And now everything is exactly the same here. And we press create pull request. And now exactly the same. I get an email, Quinn gets an email, Anthony gets an email, few more people which are on the reviewer team. And then, yeah, I have to press merge pull request. Usually like the test should run again. I'm not sure why they're not running at the moment. We can check Travis. Maybe they are having issues. See. Branches. Pull requests. See. Looks like Travis is not working. That's basically our CI workflow. But usually there should be a test, and probably if we just wait like half an hour, it will also automatically start. Yeah, now you have to wait for me or for somebody else again, and we will then eventually click merge pull request again. And then, voila, it's inside the dev branch. Okay, same thing again. I can delete the branch because I don't need it anymore. And that's basically like the longer workflow. And it might look a little bit scary if you're not used to like using Git, but it works technically very similarly. And yeah, locally you can make any changes, and there's no way. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. But that's like the author has to do it. Not sure if I can do it. And hi, Freebie. So basically, that's the general workflow how this works. This will also like become a tutorial video for newcomers, and I will like later link it in the how to make changes to the MPF documentation section. So that's basically what I wanted to tell you in a nutshell. One thing which led to confusion in the past is also that like there are two branches, or there are like a few branches here, but there's the dev branch and latest. And latest is basically the documentation for our stable release. So our stable release is the one which you get if you just go to docs mission pinball.org and then you get to latest. It's at the moment 54. And if you go, basically you can change here to dev. It often makes sense to make those changes in dev, unless they also, it's wrong in the current release, right? You can, it's something you correct with the current release, you can make it on latest, and we or I will often then take your change and also apply it to the dev branch. Otherwise, it would basically be the problem would reappear on the next release. So it generally makes sense to make changes to dev, and that usually makes sense. But you can also do changes against latest if it's something which is like only wrong in that release, for example. But if possible, please change to dev here. Sometimes it already has been fixed in dev, for example. So change here, and then you can edit the dev version. That's basically the last thing I wanted to notice here. Now, if you got any questions, feel free. I can answer hopefully all your questions. And otherwise, I basically got all my content done. How do you embed images or other files? How are images organized? That's actually a good question. So if we go back to Wikipedia here, where all the knowledge of the humanity is, you can find this small section, and that tells you how images are included. And that's also like how we do this. This is basically relative to the root of the repository. And we can look at some images. For example, we can go into the media controller stuff. That should be displays. Yeah, it's called displays, right? And often, so there's like no really fancy structure here. So, for example, in displays, there's like an image folder where we have got a lot of images. So technically, there's like there aren't any requirements except that's inside the repository, or that the image has to be inside the repository. Often we put it like inside a certain area. You often will find image folders like this one. So for all display related stuff, we put images in the displays image folder here. And then we can look at, for example, transitions probably. Yeah, I know you can see that here we do exactly that way, image, like it was in Wikipedia, and then /displays, that's this folder, /images here, and then like the image name here. Should be some no transition GIF somewhere. No transition GIF here. So that's how this is organized. If you add images, please make sure that they are not too large. So like one of the conceptual problems of Git is that like the repository just grows. It can never shrink, at least not always. So usually it will just grow. So we want to try to keep the repository small. So like keep it at a reasonable resolution. So something like 800 pixels wide or 1024 pixel wide or something, which makes sense for that website. Unless it's a tiny detail where you should like zoom in. But other than that, please keep those small. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, tiny PNG. Yeah, so minimize the images. Use a PNG if it's few colors, and use JPEG if it's like a picture. If you actually make a picture, JPEG is often a lot smaller than PNG, for example. But I guess tiny PNG will probably tell you that you should use this or that format. So often it's useful to look at which format is the smallest. And then include it like that at the image, and then it will be displayed. Would you suggest the best practice is to place most files in the image folder of the current section? Yes. Unless like you got like a subsections where you got like 50 images, then and it's all like related to slides, for example, then you could put in a subfolder, an image subfolder. At the end, those won't be visible to the user, so it's only internal organization. So I would use what's there, and if there's nothing, you can move that. And I mean, don't be afraid. You create a pull request, and there's somebody who will review it, and then we will, if it really is not good that way, we will probably tell you, or we will might also fix it ourselves. So that's what we would do in this case. Yeah, I already showed you like links, how external links work. There's also internal links, and that's like a little bit tricky syntax. This looks like this. So you get double.doc, and then you use like the path of this folder. So for example, we could go this place index, and then leave out the RST. So like there's like this index, right? This place index, and that would link to the displays index page. Basically the title of that link would be the headline of this page. So in this case, it would be displays, DMDs, and graphics, which is often fine. If you want to explicitly set a title, you can write something here like see the display section, but then you also have to add those brackets here, and then you set basically an explicit title. So that's how you create documentation links inside the document. So inter-doc links, that's how it's called. Another thing, if you create a new page, you also have to add it to the table of content. Otherwise, there won't be any links to it, and the CI will complain. And I mean, also like nobody will see your page because there's no link to it. So what you typically would do is, for example, if we created a new page in this place, let's do it. New file, I don't know, alpha numeric, right? Alpha RST, alpha displays. We underline it. Very basic page. Now we also have to add it to the index page here, and there's typically like a TOC tree type, table of content tree here, and you then add it here. So either you can give it an explicit title again, alpha numeric displays alpha, like that, or you can also, I think you can also just write it like this, and then it will use like the page title again. Yeah, and with that, it will include it into the table of contents, and it will just work. You can also generate the docs locally if you want. You have to install things, and then there is a makefile. This one, make, and there's all kinds of options. But typically you want to use either make HTML. We can run it, hope the stream will survive because it's CPU hungry. This will now, okay, yeah. it does a little bit of magic and now also clones mpf and mpf-mc because it needs that to generate like the event and config reference. So it's basically live rendered. It might also like take a while now. So that's what you can do. That will generate the HTML page for you. Reading sources and writing sources will take some more time. So we can leave this running. There's also something which is like the mpf-doc unit tests. It's make unit, and that will test the documentation. It sounds scary. Okay, now alpha RST is not included in any tree. I just included it. I didn't save the page. The first mistake. Save the page. Yeah, like there's also make unit, and this will test all configuration snippets. So the way this works is, for example, we will find something here. And this looks like this. So there are code blocks. Basically, they are used to format code, for example, YAML code or Python code or anything. And what we did is we created like a custom code block, which is called mpf-config. And that, as you could imagine, formats mpf-config. But more than that, it also can test those config snippets. And that way we make sure that all our config snippets in the documentation also stay valid. And that's also something we run on our CI. So we check that if we change stuff in MPF, that all our config snippets in the documentation still work. And here you can see that there's like this, basically this comment, like a lot of comments here, right? And there's like a special comment, which is just used like when we run the tests. It's not shown in the web page. We can look at that for once. Let's go there. Tutorial, page 12. And here you can see the first example. And you can see that it starts with ball devices, right? And not with switches. And the reason for that is that this is basically commented out. You can also, it tells you this example is tested to be valid MPF config, however it's not integration tested, some parts are hidden, click to show full config. We can click here, and now we see basically all the configuration which we are using in tests. So this is, yeah, that's how we make sure that this stays valid. But you can also copy this, and this will work in MPF. It's what we try to provide. Yeah, and that's working this way. So it's commented out here, and there can be also test sections here. There can be like explicit test sections at the end of the config snippet. Maybe we will find some. Yeah, for example, this one, tutorial step 14. There we actually check first that you can start a game and that certain slides are shown, that certain text on the slide is shown. Just to make sure that if you run this actually works. I mean, it doesn't mean that it looks pretty, but at least the text will show somehow. That's what we make sure this way. And we prevent ourselves from breaking the documentation, because like in the past, we often did that. And that's annoying for new users and even like for old users, like for everybody, it's annoying. Yeah, and we solved it by automation. Yeah, like there's also like some annotations for modes and so on. So that's basically a single test case, a single file test case for a whole machine. So now it basically created the documentation, and we can open it also. Like it's in _build HTML. And now I can browse my local documentation here, and that looks almost like on our online page, except that it's now local. Now I can also look at our new page in, where is it? Displays and graphics. And now I added like the new page. I forgot to save it, right? So we have to run like make HTML again. Thanks, Breezy. Actually, we stole that from Rust because they do this on their documentation, and I wanted it too. And now you can see that it's much faster on the second run because now it only generates the events. So it will recreate the event files every time. So it takes a few seconds, but it's not as slow as in the first run. So now it's only taking like 30, 50 seconds something. Let's see. But probably, yeah, now I reloaded and this page now appeared, right? Alphanumeric displays. And that's my new page I created in the table of contents. So that's how you create new pages here. And now, yeah, it runs the rest of it. And now I will also show you like how the unit tests run. So let's cancel this. You can also like run make unit. And now it will look at all the samples and read all the sample files. Again, reading all the source, and now it will then create them, basically turn them into unit tests. And this is basically writing output. It's not really writing output, it's creating unit tests. And afterwards they will run here. Might be lagging now again, and hopefully they won't fail. But we test all of the stuff. And that's basically the fast way of testing it now. And we got also like another special type of config, and that's the wrong ID. That's mpf-mc config. So in case you want to test not only mpf, but also like the mpf media controller, then you can run like mpf-mc config. And so that's basically for test cases where you also want to assert on certain slides, for example, like this one, where we start like mpf, the media controller, and then we assert that the media controller shows certain stuff. So this like test now, the unit test in, yeah, now it's 36 seconds. Usually it's like 20 seconds on my PC. And I think it's make unit full. And this will take probably now 3 minutes or something, because it will also spawn like a media controller for a lot of those tests. And that takes, as you will see, it will take like a lot more time. Let's see. I mean, I will now, for some test cases now here you can see that there are certain slides popping up, and we test certain examples. And that's also run on CI, but to be honest, I usually don't run this locally because it takes just a little bit too long for my usual workflow. Only if I make like media controller changes and I want to make sure that this still works, but not very often. So it's more like a CI thing. So you can see all kinds of stuff which we are testing here. And that's mostly what there is on the documentation, or how to modify the documentation. There's still also like the dev documentation, that's dev.missionpinball.org. And that's like in another repository, but it's very similar. Is there any way to see what has changed recently in the docs other than looking at the Git repo history? You can ask me or Quinn, but seeing is probably tricky. I mean, the Git history isn't that bad in my opinion, so you can look at nothing here, commits, and then you can see what changed, right? So that's our changes from today, and here I fixed something. Quinn wrote about the Pcone. I don't know how this hardware is pronounced, but it's new hardware from Penny K. So Pcone probably. He documented that hardware. Yeah, I fixed other stuff, and that's where you can look it up. I guess I will also do like an update stream in like a month or two, where I will like explain all the changes. But probably I only cover like larger changes in the documentation, not small changes. At least last time, I think I didn't, but also had like a lot of other stuff to cover. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you want to know, but that's the easiest way. You can also like look at the history for certain folders. So if you are only interested in, for example, display changes here, then you can go into the folder in GitHub and click on history inside this folder, and you will only see the history for this folder. So that's like a little bit less. I don't know if it helps. You can also like run it locally with your Git client. So there are multiple ways to get a Git diff, except like, yeah, like you don't have to look at everything. And now if we go to the documentation, our fix from earlier, I reloaded. Yeah, I reloaded, now it's online. Yeah, so and with a proper IDE like VS Code, there's often also like a way to see what changed in a file. Actually not, as I'm using a PyCharm most of the time, I don't know where this feature is, but it certainly has a way to annotate the file. SCM. Okay, here. Yeah, I don't use source control in Visual Studio Code. I use the CLI. But you can probably also do it somehow in CLI and in VS Code. So there are multiple ways to do this. Yeah, I guess. I guess that's so. Oh yeah, that's also like a good question. Thanks for that. So common mistakes, yeah, like uploading like a raw mobile phone picture. That's like a common thing, and that it's like 3 megabytes. That's too much. I mean, it won't help anybody, right? That's like a common thing. And then what I showed with like the table of contents. That's also common that people forget to add their pages to the table of contents. Underlines on the headlines so that the length doesn't match. I guess that's also like tricky in some editors because you need like a constant size font, like in VS Code. Here, this is a constant size font, right? So S is exactly the same as like an R, or like an I. In other editors with like Arial or Comic Sans, I don't know, those letters have different width, and you need like a fixed font width. Otherwise, it won't work. And like that's common that you see like somebody added a word here and he forgot to fix the underline. Yeah, and then but luckily VS Code will complain if you use VS Code or any IDE which has a linter. Yeah, and other things are often like people do this. They go to certain pages like authors. Yeah, a lot of people forget to add their name to authors also. But they click on edit, they edit the file, but they don't click create pull request. So something, right? So test branch. They do it like this. They propose this change. And then they try to go back. I don't know what they do, but they never actually like create the pull request. And then we actually won't see it. So they made a change in their repository somewhere on GitHub, but we never see the change. And that's a little bit sad, because they already did most of the work, and basically everything which is missing is only the pull request. And sometimes I look at like forks of our repository and I go through them and create pull requests for changes which people already did, but they forgot to make the pull request. And if you're not familiar with the Git like workflow, it's totally understandable that you do not know that you need this. And that's also like a common thing which then prevents the change from coming to us. But I mean, especially if you like write larger things, do not worry too much about formatting. We can fix it later. If you create a pull request, there's also like a checkbox. It's not here for me, but for you there will be a checkbox which is like allow edits from maintainers or something. And if you check that, I think it's checked by default, then I can actually make small changes to your change, and that's very helpful. So if it's just 2 underscores or like 2 minuses for the headline, I can just add them, and I do not have to ask you to do this. That's useful. So check that if you're uncertain, and don't be afraid. So we will make it happen together. Yeah, but no, I won't do this pull request because it's a bad one. Yeah. Okay, you had Travis fail on you. Yeah, that's usually for example, if you do like that will fail Travis, for example. This one. If Travis fails, let's see how this looks. So typically, you then get like something like this X here, and you can go to Travis there and look at the log. And it's often always very, very long, but just scroll down to the end and there will be something like like this file is not included in any talk tree. So this message looks exactly like the one which I had earlier when I ran it locally, and also like what VS Code will tell you. So this error will also this error will also appear there, right? Title underline too short. But that's also the same which Travis will tell you. So that's for example now the problem here. Unfortunately, Travis often only shows like the first error. So there's one error, you fix it, and you get the next one. And then you have to go like 2 or 3 iterations there. That's unfortunate. If you do it more often, like I do, then just run like make HTML locally, and that will give you, it will give you the same errors, because Travis is just running like make HTML and then afterwards make unit full. And that's the 2 commands it is running. So if they are happy locally, there's a very high chance that Travis will also be happy. Another common thing is, if you work with Git, is that you forget to add files. So if you create a new file, like for example my alpha file here, and now I run like git commit. Now if you look at this carefully, it says changes to committed is display index, untracked files display alpha, but I need to add this file. So to add it, I cancel it, right? I go git add display alpha, and now if I run git commit -a, then I got both files. So it's a common mistake, even at work. That's the most common reason why CI fails on me, because I forget to add some file. Even like in mpf development, that's the most common fail for me. I forgot to add files, and at work also the same. So that's very, very Very common thing in Git to forget that. IDEs try to help you if you create files. Some IDEs, not VS Code, but like I think like PyCharm, for example, will propose to add it to Git, so it will help you here. So, but that's like, in my opinion, one of the common reasons for that. Yeah, anything else you want to know? Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking that. I guess that will help other people because you're not the only person to whom this happens. So thanks for asking. Very helpful. And yeah, thanks guys for joining. And yeah, have a nice remaining Sunday and a nice week next week. Keep on hacking some pinball and see you next time.